Hello and welcome to the Holly Doss Show. This is your host, Holly Doss. I'm actually on a mission to help as many of you as possible get in touch with your higher selves, break free from ego identities, raise your frequencies, and become the best version of yourself. So let's get started. Hello, friends. Okay, so today's episode is going to be about ego identities. We are going to talk all about ego identities, what they are, how to locate them, and how to ultimately let them go. And the reason why it is so important to have this knowledge and to do this work is so that you can be yourself, your true self. Not just an image of yourself that gives you a sense of identity, not a role, not a title, not a belief system, not a stance or a position. Just be yourself. So I think the best place for us to start is to just define what ego is. Ego is primarily conditioned thought forms. Basically, it's any image that you have of yourself that gives you a sense of identity. And that identity derives from the things that you tell yourself and things that other people have been saying about you that you've decided to accept as truth. So let's repeat that. Ego is basically any image you have of yourself that gives you a sense of identity, and that identity derives from the things you tell yourself and the things other people have been saying about you that you've decided to accept as truth. So, an ego identity is anything you claim as my or mine that adds to your sense of self and that would cause conflict if threatened or lost. So let's repeat that again. An ego identity is anything you claim as my or mine that adds to your sense of self and that would cause conflict if threatened or lost. So that is a lot of definition, and I'm sure you're probably wondering, how does this apply to my life? So we are going to go right into an exercise to help you map out your own ego identities. And then I'm going to teach you how to let them go. So go ahead and get out a pen and a piece of paper. And I want you to make 2 columns. And on the left column, at the top, I want you to put the word superior. And on the right column, I want you to put the word inferior. So the left column is superior, the right column is inferior. So I want you to start with the column on the left, the superior column, and I want you to list all the things about yourself that you believe to be superior. An example of this might be the car that you drive. I drive a better car than blank. I drive this car to prove blank. I live in this neighborhood, which is better than blank. Okay? I believe everyone should be vaccinated or no one should be vaccinated. One or the other is probably where you stand. So, you get my drift. Everything that causes feelings of superiority in you, you're going to list in this left column. Now I want you to repeat what you just did in the right column, except for lists of things that cause feelings of inferiority in you compared to another. Again, that example, I drive such and such car, is not as good as blanks. So again, you're just listing the things that bring up feelings of inferiority in you. You know, I've done this exercise so many times, and it is amazing the things that come up for myself and others. And it all boils down to ego. It all boils down to these are all ideas or images about ourselves that have 100% been created in our mind. And ultimately, good rule of thumb is whenever you feel superior or inferior to someone, now you know ego is at play. Whenever you feel superior or inferior to another, ego is at play. So I really want you to think hard about these. This is not something you might finish today or in the next few minutes. This might be something that you ponder over the next few days. But I want you to be very, very real and honest with yourself. No one has to see this. And even if they do, that's ego if you're worried about judgment, okay? So get real about your beliefs and your positions, your images that you feel like you've got to live up to, the images you've created in your mind of yourself that you feel like you've got to maintain. Get very, very real. You know, if you are one of those that your political stance or your religious beliefs are being used as a tool to measure others, then it's your ego. And that should be written down in your column of superiority. Because neither of those systems were built for your ego identity to twist for your own use. So now I want you to start a second page, and I want you to start to list if each of those things from page 1 were lost, taken away, threatened, or challenged. Particularly for the column where you listed things that cause feelings of superiority in you. Okay, so what would that look like? If someone gives a different opinion than you politically or socially or even religious beliefs, they differ and your beliefs are called into question, do you feel threatened? Or can you recognize that that tightening in your chest is ego? So if it makes you feel threatened or causes you to feel nervous, angry, tense, you know ego is at play. And you need to write out what it would look like if you just let that shit go. And the same goes for the feelings of inferiority. What if those changed? Or what if they didn't? What if you just recognized, that's just my ego? I can look at someone else and appreciate their life without comparing mine to theirs. Because if I start comparing, that's just ego. But if you're not there yet, I want you to write what it would look like if you just decided to let that go too. And to recognize that it was ego. What would that look like for you? So once you've finished making your list, I want you to just sit with those thoughts that come up as a result. Really just let the thoughts come up about each one of these things. Can you see the illusion they have created in your life? Really go there. How do you see yourself if stripped of beliefs, opinions, roles, possessions? They're all illusions. So how do you see yourself if you're stripped of all of them? So the answer should give you pretty good measurement of where your true sense of self stands. Not the image your mind has created and portrayed to the world, where your actual true self stands. Who are you when stripped of all of those illusions? So now that you've recognized a few of your own ego identities, the next step is to start identifying the patterns of thinking or behaviors that are negatively feeding those ego identities. For a lot of people, this is social media. Also, for a lot of people, it's mainstream news. Recognize what you're allowing in that's causing feelings of superior or inferiority and let them go. Let them go. No, I don't mean go sell your car and start walking everywhere. I mean, let go of the illusion that it adds to or takes away from who you are. Recognize your belief about the car and detach from the earthly meaning you've given it. The meaning that you've given it. That's what you're letting go of. Train yourself to appreciate things, people, roles, positions, beliefs, but become so solid in your own presence and so out of your ego that attaining or maintaining them has zero impact on your awareness, on your level of consciousness, on who you really are. Really recognize when you're not present and why. Ask yourself, what am I giving meaning to in this moment that is solely ego? Recognize it as that. And I can assure you, you will not attach yourself to it. So you're going to have to work at this. You're going to have to train your mind to recognize your ego. Today is not the first time you're going to be making these lists. Make them often. Make them until you lose your ego altogether. The negative ego, the ego identity, not the healthy sense of ego that you're going to find in the dictionary. I mean the ego identities that are keeping you earthbound and in your head. So let's just take a moment to recap. Whenever ego identity sets in, you can recognize this very quickly if you will just remember this one sentence. Whenever feelings arise of superiority or inferiority, ego is at play. And by recognizing and sitting with those images and illusions, that starts the process of letting them go. Recognizing the illusions that ego identities have created in your life is the first step in letting them go. And finally, the last step is to let go and detach from the earthly meaning you've attached to your ego identities. Train yourself to appreciate everything, but become so solid in your presence that attaining them or maintaining them has zero impact on your awareness and on your consciousness. So I'm going to leave you with a personal example of when an ego identity crept up in my life, and I was not living in the present moment, and I was becoming an angry version of an ego identity and not the alive, awakened presence that I once was, and that I had achieved and maintained for a really long time. So it was about halfway through the pandemic, and I realized that I was in a very toxic pattern of following, listening to, watching media that just supported my one way of thinking. I mean, obviously it was bringing up feelings of superiority because I was right. And an absolute spiritual reset was in order. So I started listing my beliefs, just like I had you do, and I stopped owning them through this disguise of, I don't want this for us. I don't want this for my kids. This is why this. I really took a step back and realized that nothing was actually happening to me. It was all fear, feeding an ego identity in my mind on a daily basis. It was so negative. And it was the thoughts in my mind that were creating the fear about the future. Yes, there were some actual things happening, but nothing was happening to me at the very moment I was feeling so afraid about our country's future. My kids were happy and rolling around and playing on the floor. We had food, had shelter. Everything was fine. It was the threat of all of that being taken away that kept me going back for more of that daily negative feed on that particular ego identity. And it was a political ego identity, but it had to go because I was a nervous wreck. And I had to stop the cycle of watching, listening to, and following ego-driven personalities on a daily basis. They were only validating my rightness and superiority, and they were only feeding the fears created by my mind. Other than that, they served no purpose. They fed a political ego identity for me, and that was it. So, once I made the decision to silence my mind again and detach from the daily feed, the weight lifted off. It really started to feel like massive burdens were being removed from my shoulders. I mean, I really felt lighter in this world by completely detaching from that ego identity. And it really wasn't that long before I realized that I got my sense of calm back. I got back on track with me and my purpose here. I got back on track with being present for my kids, for my husband, for myself, for my business. I got my inner peace back. I got my presence back. I shifted on purpose, and you will too. So that's it for today. Thank you for joining me. I hope you'll come back next week. Subscribe so you'll get notifications of each time I upload a new episode. And if you've got any questions about today's episode, go to my website. I'm going to list it in the show notes below. Go to my website to the area where it just says Contact Holly. I am happy to answer any of your questions at any time. Have a very happy and safe holiday weekend. See you guys next week.